And we're back with another episode of the Lakers Fast Break podcast. It's Gerald Glassford coming right back at you here from Lakers Fast Break, Pop Culture Cosmos, Inside Sports Fantasy Football, and Game Source. Truly appreciate you joining us. Give us that 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. Plus, go ahead and support all of our great friends, including Daniel Berry Sports Highlights, also as well. Of course, John Costa, Clutch Talk Lakers Corner. Also, of course, Lakerholics crew of Jamie Sweet and Laker Tom. Of course, also as well, go ahead, Joe Soros, Simblades with a Y.com. Lakers in 5, Empire Jeff TV, all that good stuff. John McKillian Channel 2, but also make sure you go ahead and like, share, subscribe. Those great guys, and do the same with us. Follow whatever you can do to support us right here at the Lakers Fast Break Podcast. Well, Stone Hansen's back. He's the man behind @report_court on Twitter, talking about the NBA draft plus the Upside Swings podcast. Go ahead and check out that podcast as well, where he is back talking about the NBA draft. Stone, my friend, great to have you here. What's going on? Any changes near the top of the NBA draft in your mind, my friend?
Yeah, it's good to be back. I've had some changes. There's the most adjustments I've ever made to a board before the draft has occurred. I'll continue to make adjustments. I'm hoping to release my full, probably about 75 guys or so by within the next 3 weeks, and I'll have it all finalized, hopefully, and hopefully do a write up for each guy. But so I'll have that posted on probably the Upside Swings website if anyone wants to check that out. But yeah, it's moving around quite a bit. I have a top 5 pretty finalized. I don't think they're moving around much. But outside of that, there's different tweaks and stuff going on.
A lot of talk has been made about the Lakers pick at number 17, which, again, we don't have a final say on, but we should hear something later today or tomorrow because, as you know, the New Orleans Pelicans have until the 1st to decide whether or not they keep this year's pick or go ahead and bypass it and take the Lakers pick next year. And if you're New Orleans, I think it's pretty much come down to it. But your thoughts, my friend, is this such a bad draft that keeping the number 17 would be a bad choice by New Orleans?
If I'm New Orleans, I'm deferring to next year because um, you're basically you're playing your odds, right? You're pretty much smack in the middle. And you're playing 50-50 odds that next year maybe you get better than 17. But I think even next year, if you're at 25, it's or even 30, it's probably going to be fairly similar value to what you can get at 17 in this class. For the most part, that's not to say someone couldn't drop. Like at 17, a guy named Isaiah Collier that I really like is could drop to 17. Very, very well could happen. But for the most part, in general, at 17, I think that um, you're going to get similar value by going further back next year if you're at 25 or 26. So I would play that. I would play those odds if I'm New Orleans because there's a chance you could even get higher next year. Maybe you get 14 or 15. We don't know what's in the future for the Lakers. So, um, if you could get higher in a better draft, why wouldn't you do that? And even if you get lower, it's still probably somewhat comparable to what you could get at 17 this year. So I like those odds if I'm New Orleans with deferring.
So most likely they will defer, and if that's the case, then we are going to be focusing on this year's draft. Joe Soro has repeatedly said that the Lakers will eventually trade that pick. I know they would have to wait until draft night or thereafter or set something up. What do you think you can realistically do? Could you move up in the draft? Could you just use that for another player? Realistically, in a draft like this, what could you do with something in the teens that the Lakers would have?
Well, the Lakers are not. I'd be shocked if the Lakers move this pick just straight across for a player, or even if they added like Christian Wood's salary. Like they're more than likely, in my mind, going to use it as part of a package I don't know what that package consists of. I don't know what that package brings back, but I do think that this pick is more than likely moved if the Lakers keep it, and I do think the Lakers keep it. And I think that they wouldn't have the ability to move 3 firsts until I believe July 1st. So in that case, I think they end up picking somebody in this draft. Um, but I wouldn't get too attached if I'm a Lakers fan because I think more than likely after that pick is made, it would likely be traded once that third first round pick becomes available as part of a package. So I'd be shocked to see 17 just in a package to move down or move up, or even move out just straight across. There's going to be more added to that pick, and I think that we more than likely see that happen once that third first becomes available.
Once again, it is Stone Hansen. Please go ahead and check out what he's doing today at report_court. Plus, also, as well, of course, his podcast with the three guys there behind the Upside Swings NBA Draft podcast. You guys went 3 hours almost the other night, and it wasn't planned, but it's just something where you guys are talking so much about the NBA draft that there's just so much to talk about that, you know what? Hey, 3 hours, 3 hours.
Yeah, I think we only talked about 5 guys, and same thing with last week. I think we only talked about 5 guys, and both weeks we went like 3 hours. Um, so if you really like in-depth scouting work, you can check us out. That's for the people that are absolute maniacs about the draft, or even if you're not. Like I think that there's a lot of valuable information that maybe other people don't go quite as in depth with, and if you really want to get a strong understanding of some of these guys, um, I think that we do. I hope that we do a fairly decent job of breaking them down. So we just like talking basketball at this point. It's more of a thing we enjoy doing rather than what we're trying to make a living off of. But we really enjoy it, and hopefully other people that listen enjoy it as well.
I've had a chance to listen to it, and absolutely has some great episodes there that people need to check out on the NBA draft. But with that said, my friend, I mean, this seems to be a harder challenge for people such as yourself that are keeping an eye on the draft, but also as well just in general, because in a draft as noted by a lot of people that's weaker than normal and one of the weakest on record in recent memory, trying to find that diamond in the rough is become a lot harder. Your people are earning their pay by exactly just going down to seeing if we can find a individual that's somewhere in the draft that people will like.
Yeah, it's. I think this class and a lot of the podcasts that we've done, I've been kind of telling people, maybe I have this guy slotted at 16 or whatever the number is, but in most drafts, I would probably have this guy as a second rounder, and I'm just trying to make clear the comparison and the contrast with people of, just because he's slotted that high doesn't necessarily mean I view him as that level of prospect I would have in years prior. Like to me the I don't know, let me like the 13th or the 16th pick in this draft to me is like pretty comparable to last year of being in like the 30s. Like I think that the disparity is pretty large, and I wouldn't necessarily bank upon a numerical value being applicable to every year because the standard changes every year. That a draft gets better or weaker, and therefore numerically the value of a pick can fluctuate as well.
Well, the reason why I say that is because there is a name that's been floating around there that due to legal reasons may not be as high as he would normally be picked, and that's Terrence Shannon Jr. from Illinois. Now, there's been a lot of talk about him, what he can do, what he cannot do, but also the fact that again he does have a really serious pending rape case against him at the present time. Your thoughts on Terrence Shannon? If he was not having these legal issues, where do you think he would fall in your mock draft if you had made one?
in my mock draft, I have no idea because I have zero clue what happens in this class, and I'm not even gonna try to predict it because it's so wild.
No
But
worries. Exactly.
um, on my big board, I've decided against ranking him this year because of the charges. Uh, I think they're pretty, from reading into it, pretty valid charges, and I don't like giving somebody like that credit. But I think that last year, for reference, like I believe we did a podcast on him last year, so if people want to hear thoughts on him, my guess is things probably haven't changed that much because I haven't watched him that much this year, for reasons I just mentioned. But last year I think I had him like 12th or 13th, and that was a much better draft. So this year, if I was ranking him, I would assume I'd have him much higher, which is way higher than probably anybody else had him. That said, he's older, and also these sort of charges just make me completely out on him. I'm not interested in uh, not only like discussing that guy on the podcast that we do, but also just I don't have much interest in picking a guy with um, issues as serious as that because they seem pretty valid at this point, based upon what I've heard and read. So I'm not too interested in a guy like that for the Lakers specifically.
Once again, it is Stone Hansen. Please go ahead and check out the great work that he's doing today at the Upside Swings NBA podcast, plus also as well at report_court on Twitter. Uh, Fair enough, Stone. I again, obviously, there's some serious charges right now against him, so I can understand why you just want to stay clear away from that individual. But is there anyone else that you think maybe is getting bypassed that needs a second look, that's someone that may have dropped? Because we always talk about the individuals that have risen up in the draft, these mock drafts and all that, or people that have taken a second look and say, oh man, he maybe wasn't as bad as I thought, maybe he deserves being placed higher. We always talk about those fast risers, and we can go back to the fast risers here in a bit, but who is someone that maybe deserves even a third look because they're dropping for some sort of reason, and it's just not maybe justified in your opinion?
Um, so I haven't kept tabs with like who's rising and falling as of late, but I have kept tabs on in general of like kind of where guys are getting mocked or projected at. Someone I really like compared to most people is Isaiah Crawford. He's a name that is really niche. You're probably not going to see a lot of him on major outlets, but I think that I have him inexplicably high in this class in comparison to where most people do. Have him as a lottery type guy, back in lottery, but I think that he's older. I think he's 22, I believe, but he's extremely athletic in different ways. Very good at body contortion in the air as a finisher. Real flexible. Um, Really quick. If he's getting the ball off the catch as a driver, I think defensively he can guard up and down probably between like two through four. And I really like his wingspan. I think he has like a +5 wingspan. Um, just he's a guy who does a bit of everything really well. And I really like players like that. I think that they have a lot of value because there's multiple paths to success and to productivity on the court. When some things aren't clicking, they can rely on other things to help their team win. And I really, really enjoy watching him. And I think that he's somebody that should be getting a lot more coverage and be a lot higher on a lot of boards than what I'm seeing currently.
So I will ask you this. One thing I did want to point out is that we have seen with 2024 the ending by the NBA of the G League team. I'm very familiar with it because I have seen them live uh, in neighboring city Henderson from where I live in Las Vegas, and just to see this go down. And we've talked about this before as far as your thoughts on the G League being disbanded. I understand with the NIL, and there's no longer a need for these kids to go ahead and go through a G League like that. And I understand the results about what they were like 3-30 or so. They had some terrible record as far as it's concerned. But I felt getting those lumps in kind of would give these kids an advantage going in. So your thoughts, my friend? There's like three or four name G League prospects in this draft. Uh, I mean, I know you talked about one that's at the near top of the draft, but I wanted you to see if you could go in on more as far as your thoughts on the G League candidates that are out there.
Yeah, I have Ron as my top guy in this class, like
Ron
tier
Holland,
one,
everyone.
rank one. Yeah, Ron Holland. I very much enjoy him. I believe in him. I think in a lot of ways more than people do. Like I buy the defense, I buy the shooting, developing over time. He's not going to be a great shooter in year one, year two probably, but I think over time it's going to get there. Um, so I really think that he's the top guy in this class. If I'm Atlanta, that's who I'm picking. But I have Matas Buzelis at 5 on my board, so I have the two G League guys top 5 in this class for me. Matas is very simplistic to me. He's not the Lamar Odom Kirilenko type player that I think people make him out to be because he's not that level of creator. He's more of a stationary passer. He's not creating things for other guys. He's just exploiting what is available, which is totally fine because I also believe that the shot is real and I believe in the help side rim protection as a low man. Like I think defensively, he's got a lot of value there, but not necessarily as a perimeter defender. I think people are somewhat misconstruing him as this guy who can guard 1 through 5. I don't see that, but I think he could still provide a lot of value even if he is not that. So I have him at 5 currently. Um, I have the next guy. It would be Tyler Smith.
Yes.
Uh, yeah, I know a lot of people like him. I have him around 20 on my board. I'm still, tweaking some things here and there, but around 20 in that range for me. He's he's a guy who can shoot and is big, which has value, but I also don't think he's a very good perimeter defender. He's not the level, obviously, that Matas is as a low man defensively. Um, I think that he's somewhat limited as a roller. Like I don't think he has a great short roll game. I think he can finish it well enough. So if you're a guy who's bigger and can shoot threes as a four, but also get to the rim on straight line drives on tilted defenses, like that's value enough in this class, but not as somebody I'm super high on. So I'm around the 20 range. And the last guy I think that most people talk about is Izan Almanza. He's somebody that has been on Raiders for a long time because of his FIBA play in Spain and other things. I currently have him 35th on my board as someone who I think has the opportunity to be a decent backup center. I don't really see any starter center equity with him, which is why I have him where I do. But I think that he's a really smart player, real crafty, very old school, back to the basket big, but he hustles a lot. Good rebounder, generally positions himself well defensively. So even though he's not a great rim protector, he's still in the right position to alter shots. So I think that he has some value, but he's someone I see more as like if he hits, he'd be a more of a backup than anything. I don't really see his ceiling going beyond that.
Once again, it is Stone Hansen. He is the man behind at report_court on Twitter. Plus, I'll follow him and the guys at the Upside Swings NBA Draft Podcast. Every time they put out a new episode, they do some great stuff there. So hopefully you get a chance to go ahead and listen to them. I wanted to ask you this from our audience. Eric is asking how many of the lottery teams are going to trade their picks for win now players? The problem is in a weak draft, what kind of win now player can you really get?
Yeah, and also there's way too many variables. I mean, number one, I don't have a ton of intel this year, so I don't really have a good answer for you. And I also I don't know what direction teams are going because I don't know. Like, let's say take Atlanta for example. People are like, maybe they trade Trey Young, maybe they trade Dejounte. I don't know who they trade. I don't know which one of them they trade, or if they trade either of them. I assume they probably trade one. I don't know if they trade Capella. I don't know what their future plans are. So it's hard to plan around that. I also think that a lot of teams might be trying to trade, but that means other teams have to want to trade as well. And if everyone's trying to trade out, that means less teams are trying to trade in. So it gets a little convoluted there. So I have this class is really the Wild West. I have no idea what's going to happen. There could be tons of trades. There could be zero trades. There could be lots of movement up and down the class because someone really believes in their guy. I think that's probably what I more expect to happen rather than straight picks for players. I think it's going to be a lot of, we'll throw you a future second or two because we want to move up a spot or two and really guarantee the guy we like in this class rather than, let me just trade pick 16 for Bogdanovich or something like that. Not that he's
Mhm.
available or the Hawks would do that, but um, something where I don't really see picks for players going straight across because it's going to be more of I think teams just wanting to guarantee they get their guy in this class.
Joe Soro, who you and I both know oh so well, has also chimed into the chat. I know he's got a busy day ahead, but wanted to wish him again congratulations on what's coming up for him today. He said, Stone, what do you see when you say someone will be a better shooter in year 2 or 3? Because that's something that even when I was doing projections, because you're like scoping things out, and what I've learned, I don't know if it still holds true, is that, man, if you see some signs, not necessarily in college, but if you see some signs for, let's say, he's a good free thrower or certain other things that you might click, or you look at his stroke and it's something where if he just tweaks a little bit, you can say that down the line he could become a really good shooter. What do you say when you hear these things from other draft experts or just scouts or whatnot that say, you know what, oh, this guy's going to be a really good shooter down the line?
I'll try my best to briefly condense this as best I can
Well, you
and
got
not
all the
make it
time, man.
super complicated because there's a lot that goes into it with shooting projection. There's a lot I've learned over the years. But in as simplistic terms as I can put it, I think the first thing to look at a lot of times generally is um, age when you're talking about what they can do in year 2 or 3 because like Ron Holland, for example, I said that I believe in the shooting coming around after a couple years because right now he's not a very good shooter, but he's also like just turned 19, I believe. So when you're younger and in comparison to someone, I'll use Devin Carter as contrast. Like Devin Carter is someone who people like a lot, probably a top 20 pick. Um, he had a really poor track record up until this year of being a shooter. And then this year, all of a sudden, he shot really well. He shot, I believe, like, I don't remember the exact number, but a high volume of threes on, I think, 37%. So that's a really good sample size and a really good percentage for that level of sample size. But before that, he was shooting poorly free throws, poorly, on the other thing I've noticed is passing. Like passing plays into shooting projection when you talk about touch. If you have bad touch on lobs as a passer, sometimes that tends to correlate with bad touch as a shooter because you have different depth perception and things like that. So passing can correlate into shooting projection a lot of times. When you talk about Ron, like I think his passing was fairly decent. I thought that the touch on the touch in the mid range I thought was like pretty decent. I thought he's pretty smart on when to take shots. I know not everyone agrees with that, but I tend to think he's a good court mapper on. So I like the shooting long term um, with him and with Devin Carter, who shot like 13% better this year from three. I actually like his shooting outcome less, which is, people are going to be like, what the heck? He shot way better from three. But when you take into account all the other things, and Devin Carter's like 3 or 4 years his senior, um, that means you have a lot less time for growth. Most basketball players do their biggest aspects of development are between the ages of like 18 and 22. When you're coming into the league at 22, you sort of not you are what you are, but you're a lot closer to that than somebody who has 3 extra years of development. So I think all those things are important to take into consideration when you're talking about shooting projection. And I think the other thing is people are very quick to be like, if they like a prospect, and I've been guilty of this in the past. I'm not excluding myself from this, but some people are like, I think this guy can get to league average as a shooter. Getting to league average is not as easy as people make it out to be. Like league average is still like 37%, I think, this year. To get to that level of shooter, it's not the easiest if you're coming in as somebody who's got a poor track record of shooting. Somebody I like a lot, I've talked about, is Isaiah Collier. I don't think he's going to be a very good shooter at any point in his career. He hasn't been a very good shooter. He wasn't a good shooter this year at USC. Not a lot of indicators to me tell me that he will be one. And to just say that he'll be average as a shooter or can get to that point, I think is minimizing how difficult it is to get to that point, because it takes a lot to get there when you're starting from so far behind the eight ball. So there's a lot of things that go into shooting. Hopefully that helped answer Joe's question a little bit. And if he wants, I can, you know, go more into it either today or text him or email him or whatever.
Sure, do it right in the middle of everything that he's doing. So yes, absolutely, yes, do it, do it, do it. No, I'm kidding, kidding, Joe, kidding, Joe. But yes, so I'm sure if he wants to go more into it, I'm sure he will reach out to you on that. But I wanted to add in with what JY Hen said. What Big Ten player is Rob going to take this year? The only player I see in and around that area from the Big Ten, if we're since we're not talking about the individual, Terrence Shannon because of his legal issues, would be Khalil Ware from Indiana, who's transferred from Oregon, 7-footer. I think he may be able to stretch it out, but I'm not sure exactly how good he'll be on the offensive end. But he is an individual that could be in and around the area of where Rob may be taking at number 17.
Yeah, and again, like I said, most likely, in my opinion, this is not a pick we keep.
Mhm.
We probably make it, but we probably whoever we pick on draft night probably isn't their opening day. Is the easiest way
Okay.
to say that. I mean, Big Ten, it's you're talking about guys like where maybe Zach Edey. That's sort of the range, I think, of those guys. I don't particularly like either of them. I have both of them, I think, at around 30, then opposed to 17. Neither I'd be super happy with if we kept that pick and picked them. Um, so I'm not super interested in either. I liked Ware a lot more in high school than I do now. I've sort of gradually just lowered on him over the years. Initially, I thought he could be like a top five type player, which it seems to be like I've I've sort of reversed where are people are super high on him at this point, and we're lower on him to start. And I've sort of done the opposite, where I started really high and now I'm lower. Um, yeah, he'll probably go 20 top 20 ish, but for me, the awareness is so poor. I think he's just a very bad processor, and it really hinders a lot of what he does. He has a lot of raw natural talent that I would love to see, fully bloom because I think it'd be a lot of fun as a basketball player and basketball lover to watch that. But I just think the awareness is extremely poor, and it's going to limit him in a lot of ways.
So I ask you this, my friend. We just got past a deadline in the NBA draft where individuals had to make a commitment to either stay or go back to college, Europe, what have you. Some of the names that you were seeing, which were leaving the draft, which one most surprised you as far as individuals that in a weak draft may be able to be picked higher than they would say next year in a much stronger draft? Which individual surprised you most by going back to college or Europe or what have you?
Yeah. What I don't think international. I actually don't know when the international withdrawal deadline is, and I've been trying to find it for a while. But for college, Hunter Salas returning really surprised me. Um,
Did me as well. I was what I was thinking you were going to say.
yeah, I thought he would. He was a top 40 guy for sure. But the NAL has changed so much where guys can, if he doesn't fully believe he can get a guaranteed contract, if he thought he'd be at pick 35 instead of pick 30, um, I understand why you would go back because you can make a lot more money in college rather than being picked at pick 35. Um, it would certainly, and I would believe, hurt his draft stock headed into next year because I think that it really you a year older, and also this is like you have to make sure you replicate or do better than what you did this year. Um, we've seen guys do it in the past, and it's not worked out for them. Sometimes it does work out for them. It's 50-50. Next year's draft is just much stronger, so you almost have to perform better than you did this year, and this year was a career breakout year for him. And somehow you have to figure out a way to top that if you're him, if you want to even remain sort of in that top 40 type of discussion for next year. So we'll see how it goes. Hopefully, well, he's someone I've watched for 4 or 5 years at this point. I'm rooting for him. I think I had him at 29 this year, but I think if I'm purely looking at it from a basketball draft stock perspective, I don't think it was a great decision. But I don't know what his motives are. It's whatever's best for him is the right move, and if he thinks he could get more money that way, and he enjoyed playing at Wake Forest, then that's the best move for him, I suppose.
Once again, it is Stone Hansen from the Upside Swings NBA Draft Podcast. Please go ahead and check it out today. Give it that 5-star review as well while you're there. Plus, also at report_court on Twitter, which leads me to the invariable question that I always ask. And when talking about individuals that should have stayed or left the NBA draft as far as going back to school, and that's one Bronny James. And in recent days, you have actually on your at report_court on Twitter been a little kinder to Bronny as far as your evaluation of him. Joe and I stance, we've been really hard against it because we just want to see the best for the kid, and I just don't think he's ready or even close, in my personal appearance, from what I saw in the evaluations in Chicago, and also as well what I saw over the course of USC. Joe firmly believes that as well. We are just think that the nepotism aside, just think it's just not right. It's not. If his name was Stephen James, for instance, instead of Bronny James, it wouldn't be, and he wasn't related to one of the greatest players of all time. He wouldn't be at this point where he would even be considered. But your thoughts on this? I know you guys have talked about it a little bit. I know you've talked about it on Twitter. Where does it stand now with Bronny James now that he's a permanent fixture in the NBA draft? Not even at thinking that it's going to be, where he gets a two-way or an undrafted deal. He is firmly demanded, along with his agent, Rich Paul, that he be drafted on draft night. Or
Yeah.
night. Sorry, now it's nights. Nights.
Yeah, I hate that. So where I fall with Bronny is that I don't well, I guess again it kind of does go back to the fact that this is not a great class, so we got to start with that baseline. If we're talking about last year, he's probably not cracking my top 100 last year. If we're talking about this year, it's much weaker. It's much easier to be higher slotted, and I think that that plays a massive factor. Currently, like I've watched 53 players ranked. Of those 53, Bronny is ranked at 49 for me. So he's not like the complete worst player in this class. Like I think some people might make him out to be, in my opinion. Again, it's subjective to a degree. Um, so I think there's worse players in this class. I don't think he's solely, in my opinion, viewed as a and should be viewed as a player that is completely there because of his dad. I do think that obviously that plays a factor. I'm not saying it doesn't. That's naive to think otherwise. But I do think that there's worse players in this class. I don't think it's asinine to think that he's worth a two-way contract in this class. Like I think that's sort of where I've fallen. Like I think he's young enough and has showed enough to translate, in my opinion, to think that some people could see him as a two-way player. I don't view him as that. I view him more as somebody I'd invite to my summer league roster and go from there. Like I think that he probably wouldn't even be a priority summer league invite. He'd be more of like my second list of names I'd have for a summer league team. Um, that's not to say, I mean, a lot of those guys end up being pros in Europe, and that's completely fine. So I don't view him necessarily as an NBA talent, but I don't think it's insane to think that he is worth a two-way contract. I think it is insane that he's getting the amount of coverage he is as somebody of that caliber because nobody else ever has or ever will get that level of coverage. Um, I think that it's doing him a misservice. It's doing other players a misservice who are more deserving of coverage than he is. But it's not his fault. He didn't choose to be born with the last name that he has. So I think that there's nuance to have within this discussion because I think like he's a better prospect than Thanasis ever was in my opinion. Like I think he's like Thanasis is more of a nepotism player if we're talking about that in regards to prospects than Bronny is. Like I think Bronny's just a better prospect than Thanasis was. Um, I don't I don't think that he's the worst player I've ever seen level. So I'm quick to fully say, or I'm not saying he's fully there because of his last name, because I think he has shown some things to be worth a two way or, in my opinion, like a summer league contract. But he's not somebody I would pick in most classes. This class is a bit of the exception. So I think if you're picking in the 50s and you took him, it wouldn't be that crazy to me. And that's more where I'm coming from. Not somebody I view as worth giving minutes to necessarily, especially in his like rookie year or anything. But not somebody I'd roster personally. Not somebody I'd give a contract to personally. But I don't think it's insane to think he's a top 60 player in this class, and he probably will be for me for what it's worth in this class numerically. Just in most classes, he wouldn't be.
And while BTS puts it out there as well, he said, well, he's had a heart attack. That's even more pause for concern. Even though he has been cleared by the NBA, that's got to be in the back of the mind for whoever is drafting him in this year's draft. That's got to be there, at least in some part of the equation. Doesn't have to be Stone. Again, the NBA has cleared him, but it's still there, Stone. It's still there.
Yeah, medical things I pretty much just stay completely away from because I don't have any information on stuff. Um, I mean, hopefully he's cleared. Hopefully he's fine. I don't know how NBA teams view it because I don't know what information they have that I don't. I'm sure it's a lot more, and because of that, it's just typically I don't typically value or factor any sort of injuries or injury concerns into my evaluations almost ever. Only if it's like something that is happened consistently. Like if someone has had, the same ACL tear in his knees twice in high school, like I think then you start being like, okay, this is, somewhat scary here. But for the most part, unless it's a major chronic thing like that, it's really difficult for me to do it because I don't know enough about what's going on with their situation to really factor it in at any point.
So funny because BTS is trying to justify Bronny James as Gary Payton Jr. the second.
That's not. I don't think they're very similar prospects.
No, no.
Not
I
even
mean,
in
because
playing
also
style.
size wise too, because he's 6'1.5", and his shooting ability he needs to improve greatly on. Correct.
Yeah, I don't think he's a very good shooter, and I don't think he has very good touch. The other thing, too, real quick, I'll mention while we're on the topic of Bronny is I do think that, like we've seen in the past, greats have sons who didn't make it because of their last name. Like we saw Sharif O'Neal. He never made it to the NBA. Just he wasn't good enough. Sharif was never as good of a prospect as Bronny is currently. Uh, he also had heart issues and different things. And I think that if it was solely based upon nepotism, we would see more NBA players' sons in the league than we currently do because I mean, there is more players. Jameer Nelson's son is playing. Jameer Nelson isn't LeBron James, obviously. So that's why I kind of brought Shaq into the mix because he's another top 10 like all time great. And we didn't see his son make it. So I don't think it's solely nepotism that has gotten Bronny where he is. I do think it plays a part for sure, but I also don't think Bronny is. Um, I don't think he's the worst prospect I've ever seen, but I don't think he's worth a pick either.
Once again, it is Stone Hansen. Of course, he is the guy behind at report_court on Twitter. And then, of course, also the great podcast with him and the guys for the Upside Swings NBA Draft podcast. So you're looking at the top. Well, okay, let's say you did look at the top of most of these boards that have Alexander Sarr, Zachary Risache, the guys from Kentucky, Shepard and Dillingham. You're seeing all these familiar names now nearing the top of the board. But then again, we do not have a definitive number one guy. That and of course Topic, who you have been decidedly not in love with, seemingly there too as well. You're seeing all these names that you're finding things differently on than other people, and it just tells me exactly how, I guess, strange and how different this draft truly is, because it seems like there's not a consensus on exactly who will excel in the league and who won't.
Yeah. I mean, for like, there is no consensus for sure. For me, there is a definitive. For me, like Ron Holland
You
is
think Holland's the
definitively.
deal?
I think he's the real deal. I think I'm not saying he's going to be like a perennial All NBA type player, but I think perennial All Star is within reach.
Do you think he'll
For him.
become like a professional scorer? Because that's what he reminds me of. When I've seen him live and when I've seen him, I see a professional scorer, 20 point a game type of guy. Is that me? Am I wrong in saying that?
I think he's certainly capable of getting there. He just, in my opinion, he does a lot of things really well, and I think that he can be like a two-way player who can create a bit on the like. Let's say even he becomes a Chris Middleton level player. Like I think
Mm-hmm.
that's a pretty solid player you're getting. Yeah, it's not the number one pick you're probably wanting in most drafts. Like I think that you're probably shooting for a little higher than Chris Middleton in a lot of classes with pick one. But I think if you're going into this class thinking you're going to get a generational player, you're thinking about this class wrong. But if you're you know, I think Chris Middleton had throughout his career like has been a pretty really good player. And if you can get that out of Holland, like I think that's a pretty. I'm not saying Ron Holland is Chris Middleton; they're very different players. But I'm just saying that caliber of player. Like I think you're probably happy with that in this class at pick one, because there isn't that level of, you know, perennial All NBA or MVP candidate possibly down the road. Like if you can get someone who makes 3, 4 All Stars throughout his career, you still got a pretty good player. You just aren't getting what you're typically used to at pick number one.
So another player that has garnered quite a bit of the attention is a player again that was on the fringes this time last year, heading into this draft when he bypassed going into the draft last year, and he's into the draft this year, and that's Zach Edey. I know that people are just automatically gazing at his size, 7'4", 7'5", right in that range, closing in on 300 pounds. Your thoughts on him? Again, have they changed at all with any further examination?
Not really. I mean, have him 34 on my board, so just above Almanza. I think I mean, similar to Almanza, I have him in the same tier back to back. I think they top out as decent backup bigs, not even great backup bigs. Like I don't really see that. Like I don't think we're talking about like trying to think of a really really good backup big, but um I think that both of them top out as like okay, and if that's your highest ceiling, I'm not super interested in that, but in this class, that's enough to garner, a top 40 pick because this class is a bit weaker. So I think they can, maybe be fine defend or fine backup centers, but I don't I don't think that I know some people I really like and respect actually, and have a lot of admiration for as evaluators. I know someone who has him one. I disagree a lot with that, but uh, I'm the whole thing with the draft is you should be able to hear the reasons why. And if you're able to listen to their process and gain an understanding of why they think what they do, it helps you, I think, look at things in different lights and consider, other paths to them being more successful to where you might see them. I happen to still view him as more of just a backup big at best. But I think it's notable that some people have him as high as they do. So maybe I've missed before. Maybe this is another miss for me with Edie, but I see a lot of issues with him defensively, and I think that you're limited in terms of the sort of players you can put around him.
One player that I've actually in the chats when you're not here with us on the show that I've gotten is DJ Burns out of North Carolina State, 6'9". He says he's lost up to 45 pounds since his run in the
Not on
NBA.
Ozempic. He made sure to clarify
Yeah,
that with
he made
everybody.
sure it's not on Ozempic. He is legit 45 pounds lost. Uh, it's one of those things where people just become fascinated by the 2 or 3 games that they see him in the tournament, and they don't choose the whole body of the work. For me, the thing I first pointed out was at 6'9", at that time over 300 pounds, he's only averaging 4 rebounds a game, and I found a great issue with that, and I took great issue with that, and I just don't see him getting to the league when a guy like I'm using trying to similar comps, Kenny Lofton Jr., who's a guy at similar stature, similar size, frame type deal. He is just trying to make his way at the end of the Utah rotation. Burns for his natural, for his well being and health. I'm happy for him. That he's been able to naturally lose that 45. He is going to.
Oh, looks like it's just me. uh, Hopefully Gerald could join us shortly. I guess he's having some internet connection issues in Hawaii. Uh, I'll do a Q&A, I guess, if you guys want for a little bit here. Hopefully Gerald could join us. Otherwise, I'll probably leave here in 10 to 15 minutes if he's not able to get back here. But while I'm here, I suppose I'll do a little Q&A if anybody has questions draft related that I hopefully can answer. Talk about how slow Joker is. It doesn't really matter.
All right, Stone, are you with
There we
me?
go.
Okay.
Yes.
Absolutely. Okay.
Sorry.
DJ Burns, your thoughts on DJ Burns? Again, 45-pound loss for him naturally. And again, I'm very happy for him and his health and well being. But as a player, rebounding, I had an issue with because he doesn't, at his size, doesn't rebound well. Again, maybe some issues still at his size, but your thoughts, my friend, on this? Because again, I don't compare him favorably to a guy like Kenny Lofton, who has a similar frame that I think actually has done better or can do better things in the NBA.
Yeah, and I never even liked Lofton as like a top 70 player in his draft. So, and I like Burns less than that. I don't think that Burns is a NBA prospect personally. I should clarify that I have not watched NC State this year. So
Mm-hmm.
whatever I say, I guess take it with a grain of salt in some regards. But I've watched him 2 years prior to this year, did not think that he was an NBA player. I just when you're below the rim player who's defensively not a rim protector and not able to go to you can't really provide anything at the rim or on the perimeter, and you're also a below the rim finisher who can't shoot. It's very difficult to succeed in today's NBA with that sort of skill set, especially when you are somewhat overweight. And just, I mean, to be blunt here, and so it's going to be difficult when you're a ground bound player like that to really succeed. I don't really view Burns as any sort of NBA prospect. That's an example of like Burns put up way better numbers. I think Bronny's a better NBA prospect than DJ Burns, for example. Like that's the sort of thing I'm talking about, where I think there's worse players to be had. Um, I think Burns is one of them, and I don't view him as really any sort of prospect. I won't rank him this year either, probably just because I won't get to his film in time. But I don't think that he's somebody that I would be really interested in taking in this class.
So we'll find out in the next 24 hours in regards to whether or not we do keep the pick at number 17, but most likely we will, based off of the fact that this is considered a weaker draft. The Lakers in recent years, the past couple seasons, have not done well. The Buses and also Rob Pelinka, they've not done well as far as their picks are concerned. They've not produced a consistent rotation player. Christie, who they traded up for and paid a lot of money up to move up for. He has not been a consistent rotation player for the Lakers, which is concerning. But the Lakers are probably going to tender a restricted tag on him and probably go ahead and try to retain his services to see if they can find a spot in the rotation. So that may be salvageable. This last draft was a terrible draft for us. 2 draft failures. Colin Castleton, again at 25. I don't know how much he can actually give you because of the fact that he is an older prospect. Again, the Buses and Rob Pelinka, they've not done well in recent drafts. Their history of getting rotation players for the league has right now imperiled a little bit. But if you're Rob and the Buses heading into this draft, how much pressure are you under to produce a decent draft this time around?
I mean, realistically, probably none, right? Because when you have the full support of Genie behind you, and you're likely not going to make a pick or keep the pick that you make, it doesn't really matter how that player turns out because it's probably just not going to be someone who plays as a Laker. So I don't think there's for them personally like really any pressure headed into this draft because it's more what the pressure is. What can you do in the off season with trades and using this pick as part of that package most likely. So I think that they probably don't view themselves as having any pressure. I don't think that Genie probably puts any pressure on them because he's probably got them long term there for a while. So I don't think there's much pressure. I think that it is really hard to draft. I'll put that out there. Like I talked about before, but I think it's worth mentioning again. Like I think in most drafts, and this is a worse draft, so the numbers are probably going to be even lower. But on average, you get probably like 12 NBA level players out of every first round, and then like 2 to 3, maybe 4 out of the second round. Um, and then if you're lucky, 1 or 2 undrafted free agents that end up sticking.
Yeah,
And most of the time,
maybe they will find an Austin Reeves, which again has
yeah,
been their best pickup as far as in the past few years. BTS did mention that, but
and
again,
that's like he's undrafted and he's a starter for us. That's like a 1, 2, 3 percentile outcome that is going to occur like 95% of the time or more. That's not going to happen with an undrafted player. Like that's a very, very good signing and pick with Austin, but it's not something I would bank on necessarily when you're talking about undrafted guys.
but they
And
have failed this last draft choice. 2 draft choices plus any of their guys that they have in the two-way, I'm not expecting him to go ahead and give you any time in the rotation anytime soon.
Well, I'd put it this way. I think, in my opinion, like there's two things to say here. One is that I wouldn't say things are a success or failure until after like year three of the class because you just never know. I've done too many drafts where things go wildly out of expectation in a way that you don't foresee happening. At this point in time, I would consider it a failure considering the other guys picked behind JHS. And I never liked JHS to begin with, and I like the other guys to begin with a lot more. So I think based on that, it's a failure for sure. The second round, I would not consider a failure, and the undrafted, I wouldn't consider a failure because you're expected to fail, right? Like I think you're when you're only getting like 10 to 20% of your second round picks and undrafted guys that actually end up being NBA players, and you aren't in that 10 to 20% after a year, like I think that that's not really a failure. It's just an expectation at that point because you're living up to what most people expect. Obviously, you'd like to hit that and you'd like to buck those expectations, but for the most part, second rounder guys are like expected to fail. Same thing as undrafted guys. Like that's just what they typically do, and that's why they're not picked in the first round. If you're picking at 17, yeah, that's probably a failure if you don't get an NBA player, because you have a much higher percentage of doing that. Um, and even when you look at like the top three, historically, like it's not even I think 50% of all those top three guys that are top three picks end up being NBA players. Like it's really hard to draft, but you do have to hit on some things. I think that the Lakers missed for sure on pick 17, but I think the other picks that they have made is just what you expect from that position because you're not really expecting a whole lot out of second round picks in general. You're only getting two or three NBA guys out of that second round.
So, see, that's where I'm starting to think otherwise because the drafting involved and the things involved. We're hearing more about, for instance, Jalen Brunson, Nikola Jokic. There's more second rounders that are contributing to the league, but you're still saying the expectations shouldn't be too high on second rounders as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have Jokic, you have Brunson, but then if you look at in total, like just statistically, every year you have 30 guys picked in the second round, and if you're getting, in those classes, put those two classes together that they are in. I don't remember off the top of my head which classes they're in, but if you put them both together, like that's 60 players. Of those 60 players, one of them ended up being an MVP. One was an MVP candidate. No player picked in the second round has ever been MVP before Jokic, I believe. And then with Brunson, it's very outlier.
The
It's not
highest was
something.
Isaiah Thomas, I think, the year that he was playing for Boston, and he was the number 60 pick.
Yeah, or Manu, right? Like that's the other one. As Manu was picked pretty late, and people look at that. But typically speaking, like let's say even those two, that's 2 out of 60 players. So percentage wise, I mean, you're talking about. I'm not great at math, but very very low percentage, 2 out of 60, right? You're 1% or something. So most of the time, I would not expect a second round pick to be an NBA player. That's just how it works. That's just like what the data tells us, what it has always told us. But it doesn't mean it can't happen, as evidenced by guys like Brunson and Jokic. It's just something that we shouldn't expect out of the second round, in my opinion.
Even if that number 55 pick ends up being Bronny James.
Again, I wouldn't pick Bronny in most classes. In this class, I might pick Bronny at pick 55. He might be the 55th best player in my class in this particular class. But again, like I think looking at my board right now, um, after pick, uh, I think like after pick 30 in this class, everyone there is more like two-way guys. in most classes for me. And then after pick like 15, those guys are more like second rounders in most drafts for me. So there's a big disparity.
It's funny because BTS is saying the last 10 years the talent level has gone through the roof. And then I was going to put in there my next comment would be, and then there's this year, where, would you say
talent,
it's gone through the floor?
yeah, that in my opinion, the talent level has gotten better, and it's I think result of just smarter people getting hired in the NBA. But I think it's time, it's beyond time for the NBA to expand because there's more players that deserve more opportunities, and I still think the NBA talent pool should be better than what it is because there's a lot of players around the world that are not in the NBA that are better than players that are currently in the NBA. Um, the one guy, I mean, just to throw out there, like Emoji Gibson, who was undrafted last year, I believe he's in the Turkish league this year, was really playing well. Probably somebody I would take in this NBA landscape over somebody um, like I'd probably take him over somebody like Spencer Dinwiddie. Like I think I'd rather place my bet on a guy like that. So I don't think the 500 players or whatever that are currently NBA are the 500 best players in the world. I think there's better players around the world that could probably replace like 25% of the personnel currently employed in the NBA.
So before we head on out, my friend, and I truly appreciate you again stopping by. It is Stone Hansen. Please go ahead and check out what he's doing today. Of course, at report_court on Twitter. Please follow him there, and also what he does for the guys from the Upside Swings NBA Draft Podcast. Wanted to go ahead and ask you your thoughts. We'll go with the non-Laker related first, as far as the NBA Finals coming up next week, June the 6th. Dallas has defeated Minnesota, and they are moving on to face Boston. Game one is in Boston on June 6th. Your thoughts, my friend, on this matchup, and if the Mavs, the fifth seed in the West, can match up with the number one seed in the East, the Boston Celtics?
Yeah, well, you are more updated, I think, on NBA alerts than I probably am. Do we know if Porzingis is playing in this
Yes,
series? He
he's
will be
most
playing.
likely. Yeah, he was a possibility for game four, but at that time Boston was so far ahead in the series
No point.
because the mistakes by Indiana. Why take a chance on that? So, and then you're now giving him 10 days after that. So I think he's pretty sure from what I've seen the reports that he's good to go for game one.
Yeah, a fully healthy Celtics team. I'm probably taking in 6 in this series. Not that I would love nothing more than for Dallas to win because obviously I don't want the Celtics to win. Not that to be quite honest, like don't care a ton after the Lakers are out of the playoffs. Like doesn't matter a ton to me who wins because it's not going to be the Lakers, so I just don't care as much. But um, I'd rather the Celtics not win. I probably don't care as strongly as Joe. I've listened to the podcast. I know that's his big thing is he can't let the Celtics win. Fair enough. I didn't live in the era of the big rivalry. I think at this point it's died a lot between the two current teams actively. But it would be nice to see it again. But and I also just Luka's my favorite player in the league. I just really enjoy watching him. I've enjoyed watching him for like a decade now. I think
Somebody that you were high on and number one choice in the year he came out.
I had watched him 3 years prior to the draft at Real Madrid, and he and Wemby are the only two guys that I have ever said, and I'm not the only one who's done this. So I'm not trying to make myself look smart here, but they're the only two guys I've ever put like the generational tag on up to this point in my draft rankings, and they're by far my two favorite players to watch play basketball. So I am absolutely rooting for Luka. I think that uh, people don't fully realize that, in my opinion, he's the best player in the NBA. And I'd like to see him win a championship to prove that. But I think it's quite an uphill battle against the Celtics team. This is a juggernaut team. that plays both ends of the floor really, really well. So if Luka can do it, it's going to be one of the more impressive championships I think I've probably seen. Not quite to the LeBron Cleveland one down 3-1, but it will be very impressive. But I think I'm going to go Celtics in 6.
So last we come as far as to the Lakers back again. You know their situation again. Tomorrow we'll find out for sure exactly whether or not they keep their pick. But the coach behind the team, once they get that pick, or as far as any input, we don't know for certain. But with all the things that are going on in regards to the Lakers rumors and news, it's been coming more and more obvious that the leader in the clubhouse, if you were to make a betting parlay on it, would be none other than JJ Redick. You know, Joe and I's thoughts on this as far as JJ has not been endearing to us 100%. Joe's been very upset with his comments in regards to players from past eras. I think that really holds a lot of weight with Joe. With me, I'm just very concerned about bringing someone just with no prior coaching experience at all into the situation. But he does have the relationship with Ron from the with LeBron from the podcast that they do together. He could probably get along with AD very well because they do have they played against each other, with Clippers, LA, and then all the stops in there in between. But your thoughts on JJ Redick? Have they changed at all? Do you see any hope that this could work out well? Because again, the rumors that are out there is that the LA is very entranced with what they see from what they value as or are being described as a Riley-esque type maneuver if they hire JJ Redick.
My thoughts haven't changed that much. I'm not for or against hiring JJ at this point. I'm pretty indifferent, and I don't think I'm going to be for or against JJ until I see a decent amount of games played under his coaching as head coach. And that would be the case, I think, for pretty much any of the candidates that were listed initially for the Lakers. Um, I'm not really interested in judging them before they give me a reason to, because I don't think we don't, obviously, as you just pointed out, don't have any sample size to base his coaching off of, because there's nothing that he's coached. But I don't think that inherently makes him a bad decision, because there have been coaches that have been in the league. Steve Clifford has been in the league for like ever now, and he's pretty much accomplished nothing. So I don't really think that being a coach for a long time makes you a better coach. I just think it makes you um, hopefully engage better with the players and understand players more. But I don't think it makes you smarter at the game of basketball. So I think I'm reserving judgment on JJ until I see what he does as a Lakers head coach. Um, I I give a little bit. It's not often I do this, so enjoy it while I do. But I do give a little bit of credit to the front office for not picking someone who has Lakers ties. I mean, that to me is like as little of a silver lining as you might want to put it as. Like, it is something, because we've seen over and over again they have to have some level of had played for the Lakers, or they are have coached for the Lakers before, something. uh JJ has no Lakers ties. He has LeBron ties, he has no Lakers ties. So I think that's a good start at the very least. Is you're not picking out of a pool of former Lakers. But I don't have a whole lot to add to my thoughts to JJ, because I don't know what he does yet, and I don't think that I'm ready to say it's a bad hiring or a good hiring until I do see something.
So, with that said, I know you do a lot of great work at report_court, and of course, the guys at the Upside Swings NBA Draft Podcasts. Before we head on out, my friend, it's time for the cheap plug. What's going on with you at report_court and Upside Swings?
Yeah, I'm just chugging through names here. I've I think I have 53 guys, like I said, listed or ranked currently. I continue to hopefully get to about 20 more over the course of the next few weeks. Um, and I'll clip. I like to clip things on Twitter so people can see what I'm seeing, and hopefully get a better understanding of why I like or don't like certain things about players. If you want to hear real in-depth thoughts, like really in-depth thoughts for 3+ hours, you can go to Upside Swings, wherever you get this podcast. And if you want to eventually, hopefully, see a write-up, I'll be writing some things, hopefully, about this class the week of the draft, I'm thinking. And I'll have that put on upsideswings.com. You can find all our previous podcasts there as well if you want to listen to anything from last year or however. Um, and if you want to follow me at report_court on Twitter, I'll also be doing, I think I have a couple of guest podcasts coming up as well in relation to the draft. So if you're interested, what I have to hear about other teams, or I'll be on other team podcasts as well.
Brings a tear to my eye.
I'm not leaving you. I'm just
That's a big tear to my eye.
spreading my services.
I'm just happy to see, because you when you and I talked last year when we saw each other at Summer League, you looked like someone, and it was on his way out, and like Al Pacino in The Godfather Part 3, they sucked you back in with the NBA draft. You just couldn't escape it, could you?
It's hard to leave something you love as much as I love the draft. So I'm happy to be back, and I'm happy to be doing it in a way that I think is a lot healthier, where it's more of a hobby. It's not a full career life thing that I'm doing, 60, 70 hours a week. So being able to do it a lot more casually has been a lot of fun.
He did drop dead 5 minutes later after saying that famous line.
Yeah, I don't.
I'm just kidding. It was a joke in there. But yeah, I was saying Al Pacino, when he uttered that famous line, he drops dead like 5 minutes later.
Joe might drop dead if he hears this, but I've never watched The Godfather. I don't watch movies.
Oh my
really,
gosh.
so.
He's probably somewhere at a graduation ceremony just cringing as he speaks. It's like he just got slapped upside the head.
I just do not care about movies, but I know that's not going to bode well with Joe's thought of me.
Well, I will say before we go, PTS has been calling Jesse Buss Jesus 2.0. I will just say I saw Jesse Buss in Henderson next to a bar, and I will just say it's very far from Jesus 2.0, and I'll just leave it at that. So,
are you turning wine into water?
Yeah, he was. No, he was drinking something. I will say, I can't say what, but yeah, that was just before I got bumped by Shams Charania. It's very interesting when you go to these events, and at halftime, everybody just like millows out to the bar or millows out to go ahead and schmooze with each other. And yeah, it was just interesting to just parlay out that. It's very funny.
There's a lot of the schmoozing. There's some schmoozing happening at the at Summer League at the actual building, the Thomas and Mack Center, but the real schmoozing I have found comes at the hotels. Is where a lot of the talks are happening. So if you're walking into a hotel, it won't be uncommon to see reporters, players, GMs, coaches going off, talking with two or three of them, buying each other drinks, and giving each other fake pats on the back.
Absolutely. And it's so funny because you go outside, because you told me about you walking back to the hotel in 110-degree heat, and then you go inside the Thomas and Mack, which like ups the AC for like it makes it like 30 degrees in there. People like, the extremes or whatnot. It's just so funny how life at the summer showcase that is the Summer League truly is. It's just so funny. But I was glad to see you there, my friend. It was just great to see you. And of course, hopefully you'll be able to return someday soon to Summer League.
Yeah, hopefully. It won't be this year, unfortunately, but hopefully maybe the year after.
You got it. No worries, my friend. Absolutely. Hopefully you won't have a Tristan Vucevic spraying water in your face, next time around. So, yes. I told you that story, right?
I think so, yeah. I've heard that, and I think someone had told me that Vlade Divac was spewing cigarette smoke in his face. So,
well, that's not surprising.
Yeah, from Vlade, it's not. But there's a lot of stuff going in people's faces apparently at Summer League.
Well, there you go. But again, it is, of course, Stone Hansen. He is really up on the draft as best he can. Please go ahead and check him out today at report_court on Twitter. And, of course, the Upside Swings NBA Draft Podcast with those great guys there covering the world of the NBA draft in specifics you need to know about as well. Well, my friend, it's been great to have you on. Looking forward to the next conversation. I will see if somebody can stop by today. I haven't heard an answer yet, but if I do, I will let you know if something can happen, materialize today. But otherwise, we got a great weekend in store for you. Looking forward to more great words from you, my friend, and more great words from everyone out there right here at the Lakers Fast Break Podcast.
All right. Appreciate you having me on again. Hopefully you enjoy the rest of your Hawaiian vacation. Sounds like a blast. I think you're muted.